So the most surprising new coaster we rode in 2025 together was the Hebei Zhongji Metallurgical Equipment Manufacturing Company Ltd. manufactured 4-ring roller coaster at Dagwon Park in Kunming, Yunnan, China. And we stumbled upon this coaster during an evening walk through the city's biggest park, which is along Dianji Lake, which is kind of like the big lake that the city of Kunming sits on. And we kind of just went there because we wanted to just go to the city park. We didn't actually realize there was like amusement rides there. And by the time we walked around the coaster, it are already closed for the day. But obviously it sparked our interest. And so the next evening, we ended up having some extra time left after hiking to the Dragon's Gate above Dunchi Lake as well. And we ended up just trying a shot at riding the coaster. We got there, the coasters at the park were still open. And not only were we allowed to ride the coaster, but the coaster with the trains that stated on the side, made in China, in bold letters, actually had hydraulic restraints and tracked very well. And despite practically saying goodbye to each other on the lift hill because we were expecting a very uncomfortable ride, we ended up riding one of the smoothest and most intense looping coasters we've ever been on. And this layout isn't much more than, just a double loop, 2 corkscrews, and that's really practically it. But the intensity and the smoothness earned it an honorable mention to start us off today.
Yeah, we thought that would be a good one to start with because it doesn't quite crack the top 15 that we're going to be covering today, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it because it, like you said, it was one of the most surprising coasters of the year. Not just because it was surprisingly good, but because it was a surprise that they even let us ride it. Well, we rode over 55 new coasters for the first time together this year. So that's 55 that Sean and I both got the credit at the same time this year.
At the same time, together.
But it doesn't include coasters that we rode separately on our own or coasters that one of us had already ridden. So that makes this episode unique in that we're focusing on these coasters that were new to both of us. We got our first rides on them at the same time. So yeah, we've whittled it down. We did, like I said, we did 55 total, but we whittled it down to our top 15 of like the best coasters that were new to us. A lot of these are brand new coasters. Some of them have been around a few years. A few that we'll be talking about opened this year and are brand new because this was just about as soon as you could have gotten to them. Others, it was just new to us, but exciting nonetheless.
And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
And you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. And today's episode, as Alex already introduced, is all about the top 15 of our 55 new coasters that we rode together for the first time this year. So I couldn't even keep track of how many coasters we've ridden individually because I had actually never been on a coaster trip in the United Kingdom prior to this year. Like, tell me how I went to 30 theme parks in mainland China before I set foot in a single theme park in the UK. Almost ashamed of that little fun fact. But because there was so many new coasters from in the UK, because Alex has already been, it was kind of funny winding it down to the coasters that Alex hadn't ridden in the UK yet. So there's obviously a couple of those in there. And then I had a couple of good layovers this year that happened to have coasters involved. A couple of them will give a mention at the end of the episode. So it's not like all the coasters we've ridden in this year. But it is kind of fun, like bringing it down to a set of just the coasters that we had not ridden, either of us hadn't ridden before. So we both got our first reactions at the same time. And I think that for me is such a cool aspect of our travel. So we ride something new together and like we reflect on it real time at the same time. And then this is what the top 50 list is born out of. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of these are omitted on a technicality. We rode, your first Olympia looping ride was in London, and you were right, you technically didn't go to a British amusement park until this spring because you'd ridden British coasters in Britain but only at a traveling fair, and it was a new credit for you, but I had ridden it in Germany, so it wasn't technically a new credit for both of us. Or like I snuck over and rode Hyperia in October of last year, and then we both rode it together on our trip together. So that almost would have, if we had both ridden that one at the first time together, that one would have been a good one to include. But it's conspicuously absent. on our top 15 for that reason. You also rode some great stuff in China and so on and so forth. So
in Korea,
Korea. So some of the choices were made for us. They were dictated for us, made things kind of easy. But it's also an opportunity for us to highlight some more underrated coasters or rides that really left an impression on us, because we were both so caught off guard by not having any previous experience between the two of us with these rides.
And this will go along with a social media set of 15 posts. So pretty much from launch date until Christmas, we'll post one of these coasters every day to follow along. So of course, there'll probably be more detail here in the episode because we have a little more time to talk about it. But I don't know yet what I'm going to write for my caption. So there could be some thought that comes up about a coaster as I'm posting them on social media. So definitely follow along on Facebook or Instagram. And that way, maybe, you can see some photos of the ride if you're not familiar with the ride. Because I will say there's a couple of really strange rides in this list.
Yeah.
Or there's like a thought that popped into my head that I didn't have a chance for. We're going to try and keep it to 4 minutes per coaster to keep the episode around an hour, which is luck. We're not really good at that, but we're going to try anyway. And so, who's going to start us off? Do I start us off?
You're going to start. Yeah. You're starting with number 15.
So 15, I'm pretty sure everyone listening knows about this coaster. Number 15 is actually Hiccup's Wing Gliders at Universal Epic Universe. And this new for 2025 coaster is an intimate coaster, family style, and pretty much goes all around the How to Train Your Dragon Land Isle of Berk at Epic Universe. Why is this in our list? Because there's some really big coasters we've ridden that are not in the list. It's because I think this is one of the biggest surprises of the year. I don't think a lot of people talk about that. I don't think enough people mention that Hiccup's Wing Gliders is like the perfect family coaster, the perfect like coaster, nerd coaster, because it just does a lot. It has a nice flow to it. And surprisingly, it has some really intense moments. The biggest downside for me is probably actually the restraint system. I find it quite uncomfortable, which is maybe why it didn't place higher, because
Agreed.
I really do love Hiccup Wing Gliders. And as an overall product, which is also pretty important to me, I think that like on like a park, the level of Epic Universe, the queue should have been better. It's just outdoor switchbacks in the sun, like while the sidelines are kind of ruined on it. That's like slight detractors, but out of 55 coasters, of course, it did make the top 15, and that's high praise for what was meant to just be a family coaster.
Yeah, I would have to agree with all of that. It also suffers a little bit from comparison. It's hard to ride a ride like that after the incredible Hagrid's coaster, also at Universal Orlando. Obviously, this ride is serving a different purpose than what Hagrid serves, and Dragons does a perfect job of doing what it needs to do. And there's some great intense moments that far, right when you turn around, that little helix there before you start doubling back toward the station, I think is my favorite moment. It's a great moment. But yeah, there's some sightline stuff. There's a lot of exposed hardware on this ride. The last time we rode it, I was like, in the part where you do the little dragon egg sequence, I'm like, I don't remember seeing these stairs here. Like, why is the sightline so not good here on this ride when like so many other rides, themed story coaster type rides, do such a good job with disguising some of the hardware and stuff. But yeah, I mean, a great ride, and I think a great one to start off our list. An objectively likable and fun ride, and one of the better attractions at Epic Universe, which a park in and of itself that is highly representative of the year of 2025. So a good place to start. Next on our list, number 14, I actually had this one labeled incorrectly on the list because at this park, Beijing Shijingshan Amusement Park in Western Beijing, they have two roller coasters that are basically called the same thing. There's Space Pulley and Space Roller Coaster. And I thought Space Pulley was the inverted coaster, but Space Pulley is actually the small Jinma mine train that is also at the park that we also rode. So on the list, it says...
So did I put the wrong coaster on the list?
I put the wrong coaster on the list because I thought it was Space Pulley.
I was like, oh yeah, I love Space Pulley. Yeah, I was like, that's a great little choice.
Space Roller Coaster is the SLC knockoff, which Space Pulley was great too. The little baby space-themed mine train from Jinba Rides. But what we're talking about is Space Roller Coaster, which is Beijing Shibaolai Amusement Equipment Suspended Loop Coaster version 3. It is the third attempt at a suspended looping coaster from this manufacturer, as the name suggests, and it's actually the second installation of this exact layout in this exact location in this exact park. Because after the original roller coaster, also supplied by Beijing Shobala Amusement Equipment, once it reached its 20-year service life, they cut it. They knocked it down and then built a completely new version of the same basic ride with some updates to things like track style and transitions and better trains.
Yeah, so the trains on this coaster are like a marriage of a B&M Wind Coaster train and a modern SLC train. So imagine having like Vestas trains, but they're ratcheting, and kind of like buckety seats. And that, of course, the track style is like an SLC, like a Vekoma suspended looping coaster. And to our absolute amazement, it ran so well. It was a fantastic coaster. I love the layout. I've always been enamored with the layout because I'll be honest, it's the first time Alex and I rode this layout. And the layout is pretty common throughout China, but mostly with manufacturers you've never heard of, or Jinma. And so how it is that you have a lift hill and then you have a really big swooping drop into a vertical loop, an airtime hill, then like a sidewinder that turns around into a helix, into a double like barrel roll that goes across the plot. And then there's like a really big helix at the end of it, like just like a 1.5 helix. And then a couple of like slow hills going back. And the layout is almost like a square layout where it just kind of does all that in like a square. And the layout's been around for so long, but Alex and I had never ridden one. And let's face it, you've heard nothing good about them ever before. But then when they built this complete new version of it with the same layout, but they just worked out all the kinks, oh my God, it was a thrilling experience. I thought the layout was great. The airtime hill was a big surprise. It ran very well. Trains are comfortable. And that's how it ended up on this list, because I guess a lot of this list is like what surprises you.
Mm-hmm.
You have expectations. You can't help. You always have some sort of thought before you actually get on a coaster. And a lot of this list is dictated by how the experience ended up being. And that is really, really one that deserves to be on this list. Yeah. It's funny because I would have totally put Space Bully on the list too, but this is Space Roller Coaster. And I agree this fits on the list too. So then we're moving on, and then we're jumping to another continent again. And number 13 will be Wickerman. So Wickerman, located at Alton Towers, is the terrain GCI coaster that, because Alton Towers has limitations on what they can put in that park, because everything has to be below the tree line, they always have to get really, really creative. And so this time around, they had to get creative with a wooden roller coaster. And so the lift hill even has 2 levels of incline. And that's the first time I think I've ever seen a GCI do that, where the lift hill is not just a straight lift hill. It starts with a steep lift hill and then rides the hill like pretty much on the hill level in a less steep incline. And then the coaster features a large amount of smaller elements because the coaster is not that big. And maybe because I wasn't expecting much from Wickerman, but because the elements are so small, but the trains are usual length, maybe they're 10, no, there's 12 rows, right, Alexander? Or the 10th row?
I think there's
10 rows.
12. It's rows 10, 12, 11, and 12 that are like
that are the good
rows. Yeah.
Yeah. So by riding in the back, which we had a couple rides in the back, all these little elements, because the drops are small and transitions are quick, it's very whippy. And by adding so much theming to this coaster, by having a giant Wickerman statue that actually spits fire, you go then mist and you go through it in several directions, and the super creepy culty pre-show that like actually scared me a little bit because I'm not really a fan of that kind of vibe. Yeah, I thought it was really impressive. It's actually one of the best coasters ridden this year.
Yeah, it's a really fun ride. It doesn't look like much. It's very unassuming. So I guess my expectations were kind of low, and I heard positive things about it. But I also thought, well, maybe people just like it because it's different. It's a nice to have a new wooden coaster in the UK. But it definitely holds its own. It's a great ride. One of the better rides at Alton Towers, especially among the newer complement of attractions. It's one of the best roller coasters they've ever built. It does a really nice job. It's a great vibe, great presence. I was also skeptical because it replaced the log flume, and I loved the log flume, and I was like, this ride better be good if it's going to be an appropriate replacement of my beloved flume ride. But yeah, they did a great job with that ride. Alton Towers had been trying to build a wooden coaster for ages. They had a concept for larger wooden coasters in the past, and this is ultimately a much more like cost efficient and compact wooden coaster for them, but it really packs a punch, and I think it's just right. Like, I wouldn't change a thing.
I couldn't agree more.
And speaking of wooden coasters, now we move back to China for the number 12 coaster on our list of new coasters we've ridden. Jungle Trailblazer at Oriental Heritage. Now, this name and this park is technically, there's like 8 roller coasters by this name in parks that are called Oriental Heritage or some variation of that. But this is the Jungle Trailblazer at Oriental Heritage in Xiamen in the Fujian province of mainland China. So south of Shanghai along the coast, about halfway to the Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Guangdong.
If you think of like the closest province to the island of Taiwan,
yes,
it's Xiamen. Xiamen in Taiwan. You can like in the clear day, you can see Taiwan from Xiamen.
Yeah, very close to Taipei, technically speaking. This was a great ride. This is a custom Martin & Fleming's Gravity Group wooden coaster with timber liners. There's a few of these custom Jungle Trailblazer coasters out there with different kinds of layouts. We also rode one in Ningbo on that same trip. Same name, same product line. Park had the same name. However, it was one of the barrel roll looping ones, and the layout wasn't quite as inspired. It's also one that's been cloned for a couple of parks, so it's not quite as unique and didn't run as well as this one. This Jungle Trailblazer, even though it doesn't have an inversion, which is like a really cool gimmick, this one does have a 90-degree hill moment and just a great layout full of unexpected maneuvers and twists and ran pretty well. With Chinese wooden coasters, it's kind of a crapshoot, but I really liked this one. It was a huge, pleasant surprise. Once we got on and out of the station and crested the lift hill, it was a great ride.
Yeah, getting on was kind of a challenge because not all Timberliner train clearances are created equally, and the Chinese are really easy to just dismiss you off of a train, even though you just rode a Timberliner train with no problems like 3 days prior in Ningbo.
Exactly.
And there, so it was kind of a challenge to allow them to force myself on because they were just quick to boot me off. But eventually we dispatched. And even though I was kind of in a lot of discomfort because I've never had to have my restraint on so tight before, I can still feel like part of my little leg like squished so painfully. But that makes it maybe more memorable. Either way, the layout was so good. It was so memorable that this is for me really why I agree with Alex that it had to be in our top 15 because I kind of think of it like if you think of Mind Blower at Fun Spot and Kissimmee, and then imagine not the barrel roll, but imagine like having a really tall lift hill with like a straight down first drop, and then practically the majority of the ride spends its time below like half of that height. That's kind of the layout for this coaster. It has a massive drop, but after it just does not let up. And when you're about 3/4 through the course, suddenly you have a bigger element again into that same supercharger. So it was one of those rides where it just didn't let up. It was just like a balls to the wall the entire time and like lots of little quick hops and 90-degree turns. And it almost seemed like the bigger elements were towards the end. I don't know, the way they pace it and the way they create this layout, and it's actually in a jungle because Xiamen is like really tropical. It's like on the South China Sea. Like the lush forest that it blows through and the palm trees you go past. First of all, it was just kind of a surprise with Xiamen in general, is that like I knew where it was located, but I had not quite connected the two dots that it would be so much like a tropical vibe down there. It felt like, like when you watch Rogue One, it had that Star Wars island that's like, or the Star Wars planet that's like a giant tropical jungle.
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know, hard to explain. Anyway, that's kind of vibe I got. I was like, oh man, it's like super nice here, but like it's distinctly Chinese, but also very tropical.
Yeah.
And not like in the Shenzhen, Guangdong way. Anyway, but that lushness and that like humidity, it was so hot when we rode it.
And it ran super well because of how hot it was.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that lent itself really great. And then this park itself, because of its location, it seems like everything else to the more local architecture, but still like the Chinese heritage. So it had the same kind of concepts in the whole park. But because it was so lush, it also felt like by far more lush and nicer Oriental Heritage product than the one we did earlier. Yeah. So that all just combined into this ride making
so
the
cool.
list. Really.
On that like island and like the views of the harbor and stuff on the coaster, because the wood coaster is one of the tallest rides there. And it was your 900th credit.
And the park's on a little island. True.
It was your 900th and the park, coaster. Like Alex said, a great milestone.
It's by the water because this resort is on a little island, actually. So the whole park is surrounded by water. And on the lift hill and some of the rides, you're really kind of going by the water. Yeah, it was overall like a really fun experience. And I just love the theme of the park. The whole Oriental Heritage thing, all the dragons. Which leads me to the next coaster. Dragon's Fury. And Dragon's Fury is located at Chessington World of Adventures. World of Adventures. It's one world, multiple adventures, if I'm correct. And and this park, you think, oh, like maybe Mandrill Mayhem, or maybe, well, that's the two things you rather I know. But
a rattlesnake was new for me
Fury,
too.
True, which is really nicely themed. But yeah, Dragon's Fury, we had such a crazy ride on it. It's just a Mauer spinning coaster with outward facing vehicles. And there's a rule in this ride where like you cannot have more than 2 adults on it at a time, or 3 adults at a time. So like we were riding with our friends Rosie and Emma, part of European Coaster Kings, and we all had to take separate cars. Alex and I took our own separate car and sat next to each other because we wanted to spin more. And spinning we sure did, because we spun out of control. I mean, I've never spun this much on a coaster before. I can understate. I mean, it was so disorienting. The layout's already quite long and not really easy to observe from off ride. So Dan also riding and spinning so much, I couldn't figure out where we were, what we were doing. It was absolutely out of control. Probably one of the most memorable and crazy coaster experiences we've ever had. And this is just a family spinning coaster from Mauer. So that alone was really great. But I also just think the layout and setting, I love these Mauer spinners, like Tarantula, for example. And this really felt like it was in that league of Tarantula, Windjass, and Dragon's Fury for me.
Totally. It was a great ride. I was so excited to ride this because on my 2015 visit to Chessington, the only coaster that was open was Vampire. And the Mack Blauer Ensign coaster, which has since been demolished, actually. So the park was actually full of new credits. There was only one coaster for me that I'd already ridden that was new for Sean, which is the amazing Vampire. But so I was totally unprepared for Dragon's Fury. Even though I'd been to the park before, it was an awesome ride. It just ran super well. I am such a huge fan of these Mauer spinners. Like you said, there's just so many great examples of Mauer spinners. Tarantula, Windjass, Crush's coaster. Like, I love this product line. I love these coasters. And I really shouldn't be so surprised when I ride another one that really exceeds my expectations. My expectations should just be higher by now because they're genuinely, many of them are very impressive rides. But staying in the United Kingdom, since our UK trip was so sprawling, there was a lot of rides represented in the UK on this list. Mostly newer stuff, since a lot of the stuff in the UK I'd already ridden, but a couple of exceptions like Dragon's Fury, which were credits that I missed on my visit in 2015. Number 10 for us, closing out our top 10, is Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And we have Icon / Enzo, which we don't count it as a separate credit, I don't think. I don't think we do we? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Maybe we do. It doesn't feel like the same ride. You're definitely signing up for something totally different.
The real reason that it's on the list is really because Enzo.
Yeah, Enzo. I mean,
it is separate credit. Then like Icon wouldn't be mentioned
if it was just the sit down version, but it's in our top 10 of like the best new things that we did this year because of Enzo. And like Dragon's Fury, Enzo is all about making sure that your vehicle is unbalanced. Even the staff at Blackpool are like, don't ride with anybody. Enzo is just a 2-person vehicle on the back. And if you have an empty seat next to you, you spin much more wildly. So you and me and Martin and Charlotte all got our Enzo tickets, and then we all rode by ourselves in the Enzo seat and just had amazing rides. And I remember Martin and Charlotte were skeptical about it being an improvement to the experience and being worth the money. And then when they rode it, it's their first time riding Enzo. It was everybody's first time. So we were all surprised by it. And they were like, wow, like that was worth it. That was so great. I'm so glad we did that. But yeah, as far as Enzo goes, it's a great ride. Icon, the regular version, is also great. It has a great layout. It does a lot of interesting things. I think it was the right choice for Blackpool when like looking to do their one big coaster per decade. Like it just checks all the right boxes and it's the perfect fit, I think, for Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
Yeah, so the layout is indeed really cool. I'm not the biggest fan of this coaster when it's just Icon because I find it just kind of meanders. Doesn't feel like it does a whole lot. Like it's fun and it's different, but it's almost like Manta at SeaWorld San Diego, except for it goes on for a little bit too long and does a little bit less. Does that kind of make sense? I feel like, well, then I just give you Manta where like it's a little more punchy and a little, it's over a little quicker. Having said that, though, like Alex mentioned, Enzo, that aspect is just insane. That layout might be meandering when you go forward and you're not spinning, but when you're actually spinning, all the little turns and all the little hops, even if they're not super forceful, having these rolls, or I think it's only one roll on it, right? Like one inversion.
Yeah, there's an Immelman and a one roll.
I guess two inversions. But those are just elevated by the spinning mechanism. And then when you compare it to stuff like the Extreme Spinner, I would not take this over. I wouldn't take this ride, Enzo, over a Time Traveler, but I would not take it over Ride the Happiness, but I would take it over Time Traveler. I would say it's in the middle. And that's because the layout on the actual Extreme Spinners have a lot more of a broad stroke approach, larger elements, and even so they got kind of flippy and stuff. They're not as tight as Enzo. And so doing Enzo, I feel like the constant changing of directions and it being almost like a spaghetti bowl makes that layout really, really, really fun as a spinner. So 100% top 10 as a spinner. I probably would not even place him at top 15 if we looked at Icon on its own.
If you're riding regular Icon, you really need to sit in the back for the best experience. But then one of the trains is the back row is already dedicated to Enzo. So it's not even that easy to get a back row seat on this ride when half of the trains are a different experience back there entirely.
And so we're sticking to the UK for the next coaster, and the next coaster is Smiler. So Alex didn't ride Smiler because it killed. Did it kill someone? It hurt someone badly.
4 people.
It hurt someone badly in the incident of the decade.
Yeah, that was a couple months before we went.
So he did not get to ride that. So that was an credit for us both, and that was by far the priority. I mean, the first thing we did when we got there, we went straight to Smiler, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And Smiler. I mean, it's a dream come true for like a coaster enthusiast that loves inversions. I'm an inversion nerd. I love my inversions. And this had potential to be top 5 on the list, but it didn't track very well. So depending on where you sat, there were some elements that really beat the piss out of you. And it says a lot because I don't really usually care that much about that. Like I miss the SLC. But there was literally a couple of moments on Smiler where I'm like, this is not sustainable. Like there's not enough supporting. Like the thing sways too much. But it's still the Smiler. It's still like balls to the wall, 14 inversions, absolute craziness with... So really, like the fact that they were managed to do 14 inversions and keep pretty much every single version completely unique, because even the corkscrews feel different. You know, one's like a roll, one's like an actual corkscrew. That whole situation, incredibly impressive. Like I am just so impressed that layout exists. It's like the ultimate spaghetti bowl. And so from that aspect, I just love Smiler. It was such a fun ride. Definitely top 10 of the year. It just could have placed higher if it tracked better and raced. I think you agree with that.
Yeah, I know you're a bigger fan of Smiler than I am, and I love the ride, but there were just things about the ride that I feel like would make the experience better. Like it's not a perfect ride by any means. It's an ambitious ride, and it's an inherently likable ride because of how ambitious. And when you're watching it, it's amazing to admire what they accomplished with this ride. It's no small feat putting 14 inversions on a single coaster and still being something that feels varied and palatable and likable, especially in a park like Alton Towers that has so many restrictions on what they can build. Like, even if you had a perfect blank canvas, it would be hard to build a good 14 inversion coaster. And Alton Towers had this, sloped piece of land, a very strict height limit. It's a very small piece of land. I mean, this ride used to have a Jetstar. Like the park, the ride, the plot was a Jetstar plot. And so they had to get very creative. They're building like the lift hills. They like go over the bathrooms and come back around. Like they did a lot of it. There's a lot to love here, even if it's not the most pleasant coaster experience. Most of my rides, I was sitting on the wing on the outside seat because I like sitting on the outside versus heartlining, but that's a rougher ride experience. For me, heartlines make a big difference on Gerstlauer coasters for that reason. And then, like you said, the racing aspect of the ride, if you've got 5 trains running on this ride and the dispatches are great, it's unbelievable. This little ballet that the coasters do between each other, the first half and second half trains interwoven with each other. But operations typically at Alton Towers are not good enough to take full advantage of that it's very much like Twisted Colossus at Magic Mountain, where like the opportunity to duel is there, and when it happens, it's amazing. But when it's not happening, it's you notice that it's not happening. It's like a part of the experience that that is missing. But
But when you do get a racing ride, I think it's absolutely crazy.
so crazy,
I mean,
so cool.
it's so disorienting. You always have like a train blasting by you somewhere, and you don't taking photos of it. We had to wait a long time to get like some actual like racing shots or some videos of it racing. But when we did, it was
exciting.
like a visual feast, both off and on ride. So that definitely helps its ranking. Because like Alex said, it doesn't track that well.
And physical, visual feasts. I was at beasts. Visual feasts, physical beasts. We're moving on. We're going back to China. We are on a much more gentle but no less impressive roller coaster, Wing Coaster. Very creative name.
Original name.
Wing Coaster at Colorful Yunnan Paradise in Kunming, China. What a great ride. This is a coaster that was on our bucket list, and we really went the distance. We went about as far west as like developed China goes. If you go much further, you will be running into other countries like Burma and Vietnam. So we went all this way. We have already talked about one coaster on our Kunming trip, the 4-inversion coaster. And
our opening shout out.
Our opening shout out coaster. But this was the real one. This was the one that we went the distance for, and it was so satisfying to ride it. I'll let Sean, I'm going to let you talk about this one because I love listening to you talk about wing coasters, especially Chinese wing coasters. I feel like I can't do it justice.
Let me preface with the fact that we did an episode called In It to Wing It that is all about wing coasters because I love wing coasters so much. That's a few episodes ago. Find it. But yeah, like Eric said, we traveled the distance to go to Kunming, and the biggest reason for traveling this far west into China was because the Yunnan province is just a province that I think if you really are doing a lot of China, then eventually Yunnan is one of the provinces you have to visit. Yeah. And so at this point in our journey, I think actually this park was our 30th theme park that we did in China together.
And so one of the most beautiful parks. One of the best parks.
One of the most beautiful parks in the world.
Ever been
it also sits on this lake, except for the lake is so big that it's really far from Dagwon Park. But the setting is gorgeous, and this park it pays homage to all different cultures that come together in Yunnan. Because like Alex said, Yunnan it borders a lot of other Southeast Asian cultures like Laos and Vietnam and Burma, and so there's a lot of ethnic minorities in Yunnan, and that creates this like cultural melting pot that is not really that known anymore in most of China. So that background being the theme of the park made it for a gorgeous park. The architecture, the stylistic choices, the themes of the rides. And so one of the rides is Wing Coaster, which the name itself doesn't really describe what the theming is, but the theming is themed to one of the more like mountain towns. I would not compare it to Tibet because it's not exactly themed to Tibet, but it's a very similar aesthetic where it's like temples in a mountain, gold, ice, red, blue. And then the theming of it is like this rockwork of this giant eagle. And then all this other rockwork around it has a lot of like mountain animals on it and cattle. And this is all thematic, but it's so high detail that the aesthetic alone is shockingly great for it. And the Chinese coasters already get a lot more theming than like US coasters do. Like if you think about like US regional parks, like Repterra is practically zero theming compared to most Chinese wing coasters, for example. However, this thing really felt like it had like a really cool identity. Back to the coaster itself, the layout, I don't think people talk about it enough because it is such a different layout. It's a big broad stroke approach with a really snappy, almost floorless sized finale. And so you have a couple of really big elements and keyholes, and I won't bore you too much with the details of that. But then the finish at the finale, I think is the funniest part, is where you have this like helix, and then you have like a normal sized corkscrew that the whole train just like barrels through and then hops into the brake run. And it's so well hidden that for most of the park, you wouldn't even know the element exists. It's really something you discover at the end of the ride. You're like, oh, damn, there's this like little finale that's really, really snappy and awesome. But yeah, the coaster itself is on this list because we love wing coaster. It was one of the last we had to do in China. There's only one left in China that we haven't done.
And we're technically too tall for it, so I don't know if we'll ever get it.
Yeah, like we're going to try probably at some point, but we have to manage our expectations. And for this coaster, it wasn't a reason to go to Yunnan, but it was definitely the reason to go to this park. And I'm so glad we did. The park, of course, was a great experience. But this coaster itself, one of the most memorable of the whole year.
And the music.
That's why it sits. Oh, the music. Oh my God. I wish I could find it back somewhere. It's like this rock anthem with like traditional music from the region. And it's like almost emotional. Like it's super hardcore. And it's like Man, like, you know when like music really makes a ride experience? It's so awesome. Oh my god!
If you could picture
and it's funny 'cause,
a grunge rock band from like Nepal,
yeah,
this is what it would sound like.
100%. Like, oh my god! And of course, Chinese music is already so
great.
cool.
Like, you came for the Wing Coaster,
like
you stayed
before.
for that music, just standing there waiting for the trains to dispatch every 10 to 15 minutes because it's China, and it's like, oh, the music.
China.
Stand and listen to the music all day. It's totally fine.
And it's funny because I don't think I know anyone who's been on this coaster. People know of this coaster. People mention it's like, oh, are you going to the Red Wing Coaster? Because
we're the only Americans I know that have ridden it. The only people we know in China have ridden it are people who live in China.
And it's pretty out of the way. It really is. But oh my god, it is worth the track. But it also meant that we didn't have any sort of real life feedback. We just watched a view of it from years ago when it opened, and it's been in our minds ever since. And it really is generally one of the best wing coasters. But all wing coasters are kind of like the best wing coasters. But it's really
except
good.
for Repterra.
Yeah. Except for Repterra. Which did not
You'll notice that Repterra is not on this list. Even though we wrote it.
Even though we love wing coasters.
It's technically an honorable mention, but there's no honor. There's no honor for Repterra.
And there's no mention.
There is a mention. It's just not an honorable mention. We're going to talk about a much better 2025 Cedar Fair coaster right now, actually. One that also takes place in the mountains.
Yeah, because I have taken up too much time. So go ahead.
No, you don't want to talk. You can usher it in. You can.
Okay, so from one icy experience to the next, Alpen Fury, which is a big surprise, by the way. So for those who don't know, Canada's Wonderland. Also, I don't think I ever mentioned that Wing Coaster is a Colorful Unicorn Paradise. And did we mention the park name?
Like twice.
Doesn't
maybe
matter.
3 times.
It's okay.
Oops. It's okay.
Sorry, I get so passionate about the ride itself. Anyway, so moving on to Canada's Wonderland, back to North America, we have Alpen Fury. Of course, everyone knows Alpen Fury, and when the first renderings came out, they announced it. I was mad skeptical. I don't think I have to tell Alex. I was like, it wasn't a priority for me. I was like, it's roll after roll after roll. The layout feels uninspired. What is going on? Like, we're doing this on like a low capacity premier rides. Skyrocket train. Like, I was kind of thinking, like, I'm happy for them, but also this is not a capacity beast that it needs to be. And I just wish the layout did more than just like a never ending rolls. But I stand corrected because that ride, fiery, icy, cute. She's fast. It's like everything about it is like wow after wow after wow. And I'm like, is this the same manufacturer? It's almost like we're bringing Mr. Freeze energy, except it's like in a modern era, and it's of course bigger. But like Mr. Freeze is such a powerhouse, such a what the hell coaster that like I haven't really experienced anything Premiere ever again or before. But then now I feel like this is almost like, of course it doesn't do anything similar layout wise, but the same vibe I get from like, wow, Premiere really like kicked everyone's butt right now.
I mean, it has the inverting top hat. The inverting top hat has made a triumphant return. That absolutely was a Mr. Freeze moment. And again, it's like, well, it's cold. The ride is themed to being cold, themed to being frozen. I think it's actually a pretty fun motif for a coaster of like being so high up that the track is icy blue with frost, like that kind of whole vibe to it. But yeah, what a great ride. And like you said, it wasn't originally on our list, but once it opened and the reviews started coming in, we sort of reorganized our priorities. And then you found a Toronto layover. And, within like 2 to 3 days of planning and notice, we just rolled up to Canada's Wonderland, and we were there with
that was lucky
Paul
because
and
the timing
Schroeder.
had to be.
They showed us a great time
because the timing had to be perfect for it. Because I came back from, and I hadn't had a lot of luck with my flights that particular month. Like every time I would either be stuck in China for an extra day or like something would go on. So I had to come back from China at like 8 a.m. and be ready to be back at work at 10 p.m. to go to Toronto, and everything worked out. It was great. And I completely forgot to mention, it was actually my 1,000th credit.
It was your 1,000th credit, yes.
My 1,000th credit was Alpen Fury.
You got 2 milestones this year that were fantastic new roller coasters for us both. Both of us have Cedar Fair goats as our 1,000th, because your 1,000th was Alpen Fury and mine was Steel Vengeance. Pretty much the goat of each of their respective operations at this point as far as the Thuzy public is concerned.
And I guess we never actually really have been mentioning the numbers that these are at, but I guess we'll do a recap at the end.
Alpen Fury is 7, so
Fury.
it's halfway there. Yeah. It's in the top half of our top 15. Yeah, I think the last one I actually mentioned was that Icon was beginning our top 10. Put Smiler at number 9 and Wing Coaster at number 8. But yeah, man, Alpenfury, best roller coaster Premier Rides has built since Mr. Freeze, easily, of their operating roller coasters. The best coasters since their very first era of magnetic launch coasters that were mad scientist level of audacity. But yes, so and then and speaking of mad scientist bullshit, roller coasters that are so audacious, it's amazing that they were built. Odyssey, also known as Jubilee Odyssey, at Fantasy Island in Skegness, which was my number 1 bucket list coaster and very high up for you as well, became our number 6 coaster on our list of best new coasters we rode this year, which I promise is high praise, even though it's just outside the top 5. I think I might have even put it in the top 5. I think for you, there was a couple of other coasters that just squeezed it out, but it was right on the edge there. It was almost a tie between this.
Actually, I think I'm the one that moved Odyssey higher up.
Did you move it higher up? Well, maybe.
Yeah,
I was trying to anticipate
because I think you had Alpenfury.
Your love of another coaster on this list, the coaster that made our top 5. But yeah, man, Odyssey, what a kick-ass ride. I missed out on Odyssey in 2015. It was down. It only has 1 train, so when they're doing work on the train, the ride is closed. That's also why Millennium Coaster, the amazing custom looping Vekoma from Fantasy Island, is not on this list, because I'd already ridden it. So only Odyssey was new for us both.
And we almost missed it again, because when we got there, the weather was shit. First, it was windy, it was rainy, it was like typical British seaside weather, which isn't good to begin with. And then the ride, like there was maintenance working on the brakes, and they were like taking the brakes apart, and they had like a cherry picker up there, and it didn't look like it was gonna upright that day. And then by a miracle, it ended up opening up, and like everyone kind of knew it was gonna probably open up, so it formed this whole line outside. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's one of those things like everyone just starts like standing there because they all have a feeling it may open, and it was staffed. The station was staffed, and sure enough, it opened like maybe for the last 3-4 hours of the day. But we got lucky. We got a bunch. We got 11
10.
rides.
We rode it 10 times.
10 rides.
Which is a lot for me, you guys. I am not a marathoner. After we had ridden it like 6 or 7 times, we decided to just finish strong and do 10. Plus, the vibes were great. The lines weren't bad.
Yeah, the staff was
awesome. We made friends with the staff, and they let us pick our seats, which is not something you can normally do on the ride. They even let us. They would even let us like stay in our seats so that we didn't have to go around. So we got lots of front seat rides, lots of back seat rides, seats all over. This ride is really violent. It is a very intense, amazing roller coaster from Vekoma during this transitional period from the company where they were trying to branch out from the standard SLC layouts and the reputations for not pleasant or rough rides. So this ride has like a custom layout and custom trains. Like a next generation SLC train that was never actually used again, and it's like a miniature version of the giant inverted boomerang train with like similar
like
restraints.
Version of the tilt coaster trains of Gravity Max, same era.
Exactly,
really.
Yeah, that like early 2000s era of like Gravity Max and like the Vekoma boomerang at Power Park that has the Gravity Max trains and like the giant inverted boomerangs, and then this crazy ass thing. It was like so fun, so wild. There's 1 or 2 parts on there that are like very rough, that it's like a punch in the jaw, but you just roll with it. This is inverted Goodricks, you guys. Like, we love Goodricks with every fiber of our being, and this is absolutely the inverted coaster answer to Goodricks. And we were so beside ourselves with delight. It was like euphoric. It was intoxicating. Finally riding this ride after being smited on it 10 years ago and then waiting all day for it to open. So like, damn right, we're going to ride it 10 times because we can. Like, why not? It ended up being one of our most ridden roller coasters of the year in terms of like number of rides in a single calendar year. And we had a blast. It was the highlight of our UK trip for me easily. And it is my favorite coaster in the UK, I think. Sorry, Nemesis. I love you, but you're not even the best inverted coaster in the UK for me.
Nothing I disagree with there. It feels like a giant inverted boomerang SLC on steroids, and the drop is massive. What is that, close to 180 feet? Has that giant vertical loop that feels like a giant inverted boomerang. Has a corkscrew. Has a cobra roll that feels like it. And the whole thing is like kind of suspended over the flea market. So a lot of these elements are high up in the air. Like if you have that final corkscrew into the brake run, everything about this layout is just kind of unconventional, and it feels. Oh man, it's like I kind of always combine like discuss the character of these rides, like Gravity Max and the Giant River Boomerang and Odyssey. There's like this character that they have to them, and I know they probably do the exact same design at Vekoma, but they're very distinct, and that is like a compliment. I just love these rides very much, and Odyssey was better than we expected. It was actually kind of smoother than I expected. It wasn't smooth, but it was smoother than I expected. And the overall feel, this like massive powerhouse coaster. And in the cold wind, it was like a cold, windy day. I'm surprised it even ran. Man, the memories and the vibes were immaculate. It was like that was actually my favorite day of the trip, but I'd still talk about it. Like, it put such a good mood in us. And we had such a great time. It was such a vibe, and the crew was so
outrageous
nice.
triumph for us personally.
Yeah, and we posted about it on social media after everyone, the fans of Ireland, kind of knew about us at that point because they've all just been chatting and I've been waiting for coasters to open. And I guess the word spread fast among the staff that we were all hanging out in, over by Odyssey. And so like the whole ride home, we were just to the hotel, which is pretty far away.
Yeah, it was like a 2-hour drive.
Skegness. Yeah, it was like such a vibe. Like we're so high on riding this, and we're chatting about it. Man, it was like we had so many great days on the trip, but this may have been just like my favorite evening of the trip. We're just like high on Odyssey. Like it was crazy.
It was literally a Odyssey contact high.
Yeah, like talking about high in the sky, Top Thrill 2 is number 5, entering our top 5 list. Surprise. I wasn't a big dragster boy. Like I really never, I've always enjoyed Ka, King the Ka, rest in peace. I always loved Ka more, and so I never really felt the love for dragster personally. I thought the color scheme was ugly, transfer uncomfortable. I just thought that the hump was missing. I just thought that everyone was acting like dragster was so much better, but I thought it was honestly not even as good as Ka. Anyway, Top Thrill 2 enters the chat because Top Thrill 2 was big boy, big boss. Color scheme is on point. Trains are incredibly comfortable. The shuttle, the swing launch adds such, almost like the ride is like double the ride now. The looking down the giant spike, I think it runs kind of rough, but like in a good way because the trains are comfortable. Like it has a character to it. I think Top Thrill 2 is surprising. I would have never thought that this thing would have been in my top 15 if you asked me like the beginning of the year, is it going to be in there? But the fact that it's top 5 says a lot. And I know you two love it.
This ride is so audacious to me. It feels like such a pipe dream. Yeah, it took a year for it to come online, but brilliance waits for no one. It is what it is. This thing to me is like a crazy work of art. They did it because they could, not because it was necessarily a good idea. And I think that's a wonderful reason to do things, is to do things because it's technically possible. The payoff is so great. The first launch, it's like, it feels gentle when you compare it to the initial launch of the OG version. But that's where that's the one aspect in which the original dragster was superior, was that first launch, obviously, because that's the greatest quality of it. And then from there, Top Thrill 2 wins again and again and again. The backwards launch is awesome. The back spike is just breathtaking. The sustained airtime, it really brought a lot of joy to me as someone who was a fan of Superman Escape from Krypton at Magic Mountain, which has now been retired. It feels like that ride experience is still intact somewhere. You can still experience Escape from Krypton by riding Top Thrill 2. And then the third launch is great. And then my favorite, the part of this ride that blew me away that I was not expecting, was the way you haul ass into that top hat. And it's not just about the airtime over the top, which is amazing, but the transition, the 90-degree transition over the top, and the 270 coming out. The 270 twist on the drop down, I felt like a rag doll being dragged into oblivion. The speed and the intensity of that twist, at the speed that you're going at, is so awesome. It was a truly like, oh shit moment. You really think that by that point in the ride, it's the most exciting parts are over. You did the back spike, you've hit the top hat, you've hit your maximum speed, the launches are over. But that was the best part of the experience for me, was the 270 twist coming out. Like, it really ends on a high note for a ride that is already full of exceptionally great moments. To end on something so remarkable, for me, just really puts it over the top. Absolutely great ride.
Like, I know it was a total struggle bus getting it online, and I know Kinaka unfortunately had to die, but man, I would have honestly not been mad if they did the same thing to Kinaka.
Now writing it, I'm like, damn, they should have done this to King Ka too. It's so good. It really turned out great. Nevertheless, there was another Cedar Fair coaster, two actually, but one that was a surprise that I didn't expect to like so much. What was that?
I said, you mean to say Six Flags?
Oh yeah, Cedar. Well, we're talking about Legacy Cedar Fair Park.
Cedar Flags Parks.
So this may come as a surprise to some of you because for a lot of you, this ride is old news, but it was new for us. This is Yukon Striker is our number 4 roller coaster that we rode this year. This ride I'd heard was a great ride, and maybe our expectations just weren't where they should be, but it is.
I mean, I had high expectations.
It is the best dive coaster, and we love dive coasters. It is the best dive coaster. It also feels a little bit like a wing coaster, which we love. That 0G roll, that second inversion is very wing coaster coated. Also having a vertical loop is very wing coaster coated. This ride just obliterated our expectations. And because it had been around for a while, I guess I just thought like, if the ride was really that great, we would hear more about it maybe. But no, like this ride felt like a love letter to all things about B&M that we love, especially modern types of coasters like the dive coasters and the wing coasters. Everything about it just fires on all cylinders, especially the positive G's are just intoxicating. I'll let you talk more about the layout.
Everything about this layout. First of all, I find the aesthetic is like very Canadian, and for a park named Canada's Wonderland, there's an awful lot of un-Canadian themed rides there. So having I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's like
no,
something like really dedicated to like, Yukon is like really
Frontier
nice.
Canada.
That also brings a great aesthetic because then you have kind of like wood tony, like pineish colors to it. And then that matches the whole landscape and having, sitting over the water and all that. So I thought that like color aesthetic wise alone, it's already great, right? Because I'm not such a fan of like in your face colors. And for a ride that sits in the middle of the park, they did a really good job making it kind of work with the park. That's first of all. Second of all, the fact that it interacts with Vortex and dives through that helix underwater, that is like a really cool like just view. And then layout wise, like I said, I'm going to talk about for a bit. I just think the layout is, you think, Valraven, it just does a little bit more of Valraven, but it does so much more. And what it does so well that it just feels like a whole like sub tier of, it feels like it's its own tier of B&M dive machine. Everything else comes after. I think the layout's phenomenal. It paces very well. It runs so good for a coaster that size. Because even the other B&M dive machines, especially because they're just wings, they're so big, 8 or 10 across, it's a lot. And it just runs really well. No matter what seat I was in, I never felt like I was bouncing too much, which it's honestly kind of surprising to me. Even the older B&Ms sometimes have that problem on the wings or, on the sides. And then having the smaller elements, like having a drop and then the helix at the second half of the ride, great. Vertical loop, great. There's not a moment on this ride that isn't great. And I know people talked about it a lot in the beginning, and maybe we were just late to the party. But everyone that told me that's the best dive machine, and I was kind of expecting it to be the best dive machine because I trust a lot of people's opinions. Like Sven, one of our co-hosts on the podcast, he was like big Yukon Striker fan, so I always kind of thought, okay, it's going to be a good ride. But it just blew me away. Yeah. I just really think that is Canada's best coaster.
100%.
Not really a difficult thing for me. And even though you have Leviathan and you have Alpenfury there, which I both thoroughly enjoy, they don't come close to the enthusiasm I have for Yukon Striker. Mm-hmm. Like, if I was stepping into this park right now, I would head straight to Yukon Striker.
Yeah.
Straight to Yukon Striker. I love that ride. And it's good capacity. I think it was the second highest ridden coaster in the park, second highest capacity. It pumps out these trains pretty quick. It's all kind of smooth. Never have to wait that long for it, even when it's busy. Yeah, great coaster. That's definitely worthy of a top 4 spot. Now, top 3 is going to get interesting. So, speaking of diving, I guess it's a cute transition. We're going to talk about Siren's Curse next. So the tilt coaster's back, baby. Vekoma did it. They killed it. Was it a good fit for Cedar Point? It ended up being a great fit for Cedar Point, something I didn't expect. That surprise aside, it's decently themed. Layout is fun, and despite it being a product like a
production model,
model, another one's being built in Vietnam, which we will have to go ride. This is a great coaster. It elevated the concept. It's almost like having like a modern Vekoma looper and having the tilt as like an element instead of the tilt being the coaster. The tilt is just a cool element. And then there's a really fun looper airtime machine after that manages to be very different from Maverick, which is my biggest fear, is that like, do we need these two smaller sized looper airtime machines? They're such different rides. It fits great.
Yeah. My expectations for Siren's Curse were very high. I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment, but then for me, I just love Vekoma so much. I had so much faith in what they were doing. And I feel like for some parks and some rides, it would just not be easy to be the 20th coaster at a park like Cedar Point, or to exceed lofty expectations from people who've ridden lots of roller coasters. But man, Siren's Curse just made it look easy. Vekoma made it look easy. They rolled up, obviously, if you know the history behind this coaster, it's fascinating. It was originally contracted for Energylandia. Energylandia canceled it. Six Flags bought it, sent it to Six Flags Mexico, and then after the merger, Six Flags decided to send it to Cedar Point. And it was a very short notice addition that was probably to mitigate the situation with Top Thrill 2, and because that was sort of a 2024 was kind of a bust for Cedar Point, so they came back hard and fast in 2025 with essentially two brand new coasters. And in my opinion, the two best coasters in the park. I think you agree with me, although maybe the order of the coasters is switched. But for me, Siren's Curse is the best coaster at Cedar Point. And I just could not believe how much I loved this ride. Everything about it, things I wasn't even expecting. The theming around it, the water, the color scheme, the onboard audio. I mean, there were just so many little details, embellishments that really elevated this ride, took it to another place. I just loved it. In
fact, yeah, I agree with you. Like the fact that they were able to make this kind of product out of it, despite I just never really expect Cedar Point or anything but like a lick of paint and maybe a decently looking like switchback room. They made this ride look really good, and they really added some sort of theming to it and all the custom support paints they did, and it really inspired. I feel like it should be inspiring the rest of the park to do similar things. And we actually discussed this on our recent podcast episode, Armchair Imagineering Cedar Point, where I think like this theme should carry over onto Iron Dragon, and it should carry over to Rougarou, and that should be its own little thing. I feel like Cedar Point is really good at building really marketable attractions, but generally speaking, they're very cookie cutter, and the switchbacks are like as awful as they've been since Raptor. Like they've never done a good job at actually making a ride look decent and theming it to some extent even. Like it's always a really clean looking product, but it's never a nice product. And now it's a really clean looking product, and it's a very nice product. And that makes me excited to see what they're going to do next. It almost feels like a bit of a Maverick comeback. Yeah. Maverick was kind of nice looking. I still think Maverick is one of the few rides that looks really nice at the park, and this is almost like that again. So that's definitely one of the reasons. I mean, of course, a great ride. That it ranks so high because it doesn't feel like another Cedar Point edition. And even though they ripped the ride out of the parking lot of Six Flags Mexico and built it there, they still made it look like it was designed for the park. And but just high praise.
You would never know that this wasn't part of the plan. I mean, the way that the midway, like when you're coming from Rougarou and walking toward the ride, and the drop was facing the midway perfectly, it just fits like a little glove. I mean, they had to adjust some things on the outside of the perimeter road, and stuff had to be adjusted, but the space was there. It was doable. They could do it. They had this coaster, and they dropped it in, and it was like a puzzle piece in more ways than one. It was a physical puzzle piece, and then also symbolically a great missing piece to the Cedar Point puzzle of like, what's the next coaster? They did a fantastic job with this ride, and it left a very strong impression, and I am determined to see that this ride is a huge influence on other parks, and that more tilt coasters are being built. Our trip to ride Circuit Breaker and Coda Land is definitely already on the agenda. But yeah, a strong contender for one of the best new coasters of the year, and easily one of the best coasters we've ridden anywhere. Another coaster that really blew us away, that was like an all-time great roller coaster experience, and probably 2025's best new coaster / coaster attraction, is Stardust Racers at Epic Universe. This ride had big shoes to fill. It has the history. It has the weight of Dueling Dragons on its back. It has the weight of Velocicoaster on its back. It is a huge focal point, tentpole for Epic Universe, which in is of itself is one of the largest theme park projects that we've seen this century. As a roller coaster project on its own, it is a very ambitious, multi-launch, dueling, looping launch coaster that has two distinct ride experiences that are both excellent rides in their own right and offer unique experiences. I think they knocked it out of the park. I can't imagine Stardust Racers being any better than it is. I'm want for nothing Stardust Racers. I think they just killed it. They killed it.
So I think if it were for the racing aspect, it would actually still fall behind Simon's Curse for me. But the racing aspect of any roller coaster is always such an added, like almost like dimension of excitement that's what pushes Stardust Racers to number 2. But not like we've ridden once or twice maybe where it wasn't racing because the one side was down, or we like slowed down and we ended up launching after the train. So like then I'm like, okay, well it's a cool ride.
It has to race.
It has to race. So when it races, yes, a favorite Mac, favorite Universal coaster, actually not very difficult. Great stuff. I like the aesthetic. I love the kind of like astronomical, kind of steampunky-ish aesthetic to it. It's almost like, I wouldn't say it's as nice as Space Mountain in Paris, which you're riding today. But it's really, really good product. It's an awesome ride, high capacity when they manage to run it properly. I think it's a great, great ride. Great fit for the park. Hard to get disappointed by Stardust Racers. So, yeah, easy. That's in there for sure. And so that's our number 2 spot. And then number 1 goes to another launch coaster, but back to Vekoma this time. Number 1 is Fighter Jet, and this is at the Fantawild Glorious Orient theme park in Ningbo, not far from Shanghai. So definitely easy to do if you're going to China, guys. And this is a custom layout that is designed for the Fantawild group, which is one of the bigger groups of operators in China. They do pretty much everything in-house usually, like the dark rides and their theming, and they're really, really impressive. I would say this is like, after Disney Universal is the tier of theme parks that is the nicest. And they had just some spectacular dark rides we've been on. And so one of the coasters that they have in their Glorious Orient parks, there's 4 parks that have this. This park is themed to wartime China. And in the middle of this park sits a giant aircraft carrier. And off of that launches this spaghetti bowl, insane 2-vehicle Vekoma launch coaster that is just balls to the walls. It makes you think, it may even be the fastest inversion in the world. I kid you not. Like, these inversions are so fast on that thing.
Yeah, that first zero-G roll coming out, I mean, it tears it up.
Holy crap. It's like, I cannot believe how fast. Every time I post a video, everyone's like, oh, is that sped up? I'm like, no, like the ride just runs like insanely fast. There's this giant, crazy top hat thing where like you roll on the outside of it coming into it. And then, you know, you exit out of it, and then there's a 0-G roll. Like then there's a barrel roll right after it, if I understand that layout correctly, if I correctly recall it. Either way, it's insane. Like, it's so fast. It's oh my God. Thrilling ride. Alex, tell me a little bit more about it, because I am so disoriented.
This ride was everything that I could have hoped it would be. More intense than just about any Vekoma I've been on, and that's saying a lot, but also very comfortable. These wonderful 8-passenger 2-vehicle trains that look like little fighter jets. This one opened in 2021. There are 4 Fantawild Glorious Orient parks. The first 2 opened in 2021. Another one opened in 22, and then another one opened last year. There's 2 more under construction. All 6 of these parks either have or will have a clone of this fighter jet coaster. So I hope that the other Glorious Orient projects are still happening and that they're going to open in 2026, because I would love to have 6 of these fighter jet coasters. Our plan next year is to go to another Glorious Orient park and ride their fighter jet. And there's a perfectly good chance that we will ride that, and it will also be the best new coaster of 2026 for us, because it is just such a badass roller coaster. The little aircraft carrier launch theme sequence that is also a midway, so you're like right at track level watching people take off into this insane ride layout. I mean, I just can't say enough great things about this ride. It is a truly flawless coaster experience that we were very privileged to ride it. We rode it 3 times and then went back for a 4th, but they let us ride it 3 times without leaving the station, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, yeah.
They had 2 trains on it and separate load and unload, so we just hopped off the unloading train, and then like they let us go right around and into the train that was waiting for guests. Just an amazing ride. Every seat's a great seat because there's only 8 seats. I just can't say enough great things about it. It's amazing when a ride that has such a great theme package, a great idea. You know, you have this idea of like, what if we took an aircraft carrier and put a roller coaster on it and really tried to recreate that feeling and that look, the stylistic look of launching an aircraft from a ship, but it's a roller coaster. They just did an amazing job. Amazing job.
And what helps is that the vehicles, like Alex said, are so short, like 8 passengers, is that some of the maneuvers that this thing does, you simply could not do it a longer train. Like it is, I'm trying to think of snappy coasters with snappy elements and directional changes, but I can't think of anything that does it even remotely like
coasters
this.
Like Eurofighters and Big Dippers and stuff do these kinds of things well, but not to the same degree that this ride does.
Not as fluidly.
They're not as sturdy as this ride is. This ride can handle a 6-car train if they were so inclined, but it's better, all the better for having its 2-car train. There's no drag. The squirreliness of these elements really comes out when everybody is experiencing the element at the same time, at the same speed, because you have such a short train. And for thematic purposes, it makes a lot more sense. The shorter your train, the better. Gotham City Escape is a great example. Having a 3-car train allows you to theme your ride to an actual, like a normal vehicle, and not having to theme it to like a train that kind of looks like a vehicle. It's like, no, it's a short vehicle. This is how it would look if it was, you know, a movie prop or something. It wouldn't be any longer than this. And as a ride experience, it feels very intimate and feels very specific to what you're going through versus a ride where you've got like 24 or 36 other people riding and experiencing something that is kind of dragging its way through. There's great rides that do that, have great front seat versus back seat experiences. But this ride, it's like every seat in the house is just a Spitfire kick-ass ride experience. I can't wait to ride it again. I can't wait to find, I think there's one.
No, we're going to go on a tour to try to hit all of them.
Yeah, the next one is going to be the Glorious Orient that's south of Tianjin. I think it's in Jinan or Jining. It's one of the two. Jinan and Jining are really close to each other.
A lot of them are not that close to major cities because they're kind of like tier 2, tier 3 kind of region parks, which makes it more fun to go out and find them, but they're not as convenient. But yeah, if you're ever traveling to Shanghai, you can take a train to Ningbo, or you can even take, if you just feel like splurging, you can take a cab across the Hangzhou Strait, because Xixi, which is the part of Ningbo this park is at, is right across the water from Shanghai, except for going across the water, it takes like a really long bridge, or taking a train all the way around the strait. But geographically, they're quite close.
Like if you're going to Legoland Shanghai, you're like halfway there.
True, yeah. Definitely, this resort in general is definitely worth checking out. I mean, they got I think one of my favorite dark rides in the world, which I want to do a dark ride top 15 at some point. Is there too.
The best coaster and the best dark ride of the year happened back to back for us at this park.
So we talk about this more actually in one of our earlier episodes, and usually Chinese episodes don't do as well, so we do less of them these days. We used to do like China episode after China episode, but people just seem a little bit less interested in that, so we're going on about it too long. I apologize, but there is an episode early in the season. It is about the Ningbo. I think we call it the scariest dark ride ever or something.
We named the episode after the dark ride, even though it's also the episode that has Fighter Jet, which was...
Yeah, I think we called it Fence Wild Ningbo and the scariest dark ride ever. And that is, so listen to the episode, because the dark ride was actually the start of the show, but this is not about dark rides, it's about coasters. But Firejet's also the start of the show because it is number 1 in our top 15. I will do a quick rerun of the top 15 and we'll move on to some honorable mentions here. So number 15, we had Hiccup's Wing Gliders. Number 14, we had Space Roller Coaster. Number 13, we had Rickerman. Number 12, we had Jungle Trailblazer. Number 11, Dragon's Fury. Number 10, Enso and Ico. Number 9, we had Smiler. And number 8, we had Wind Coaster at Colorful Union Paradise. 7, we had Alpen Fury. At 6, Odyssey. At 5, Tough Thrill 2. At 4, Yukon Striker. 3, Siren's Curse. 2, Stardust Racers. And number 1, Fighter Jet. And again, we'll be posting more about these on social media and starting today, coming the next 15 days. And then honorable mentions. So we have to mention a couple of rides for different reasons. Either we wrote them alone and not together, so they didn't count towards the top 15, or just because they reminded us or did we were reminded by them by
we
some stuff we
sort
talked
of
about?
wrote them
Go ahead,
already,
Alex.
but not really.
Yeah.
We already talked about Hyperia a little bit at the beginning and kind of explained in advance why that one didn't make the cut, because technically I wrote it for the first time last year, which disqualified it in two ways. It was the wrong year and we weren't together. You rode Beyond the Cloud at Sucho Forest Amusement Land on a layover.
So because Stardust Races is on this list, I kind of want to mention both Hyperia and Beyond the Cloud. So I rode Beyond the Cloud at Sucho Forest World. And I think that these three coasters are kind of considered like the holy trinity of the three big custom Macs now, right? Like you've got these crazy, really pie-in-the-sky Mac rides that I 10 years ago would have never guessed would have ever been built. And so Beyond the Cloud, I think, has a similar kind of feel to it as if you were to combine Hyperia and Stars Races into one, that's kind of what you get. You get a launch coaster, heights, airtime, really fast movements, kind of elements that you didn't really expect to happen, but also, I don't know, it's still
much more inversion heavy than Stardust.
None of these three actually run that well because it's still Max, but they're still great layouts, right? So in that conversation, I think I like, of course, I think I like Stardust Races the best, of course, and then followed by Hyperia, followed by Beyond the Cloud. Because Beyond the Cloud starts off great with a punchy launch, super crazy airtime on the airtime hill, really fast inversion, and then a good implement. But then the Cobra roll and the vertical loop and stuff, they don't really do much for me. Hyperia, the whole thing is pretty crazy. You're like, what? Like the whole thing feels kind of unnatural, like in a good way. And I really love that. But then the racing element for me, it makes Stardust the best. And I kind of want to mention it in that, like just
in
so
the context,
mention that
absolutely.
I wrote it, that it's a cool ride. And maybe people that have ridden the other two Western ones can kind of understand where Beyond the Cloud sits. Great coaster, but I don't think it beats Stardust or Hyperia. And then I went to Korea earlier this year. Alex didn't get to join me, unfortunately, because it was kind of a last minute thing. But I rode Atlantis Adventure, the Aquatrax, which you did a whole episode on, by the way, so check that out. It literally is called Aquatrax, Tilt Coaster and more. So Atlantis Adventure was a cool coaster because it just didn't ride anything like I expected it to be. And I want to mention it because it was new this year and it was cool. It's almost like a Maverick. The first half of it is just trying to be like a launch coaster. Second half is trying to be like a fake water ride. It doesn't really work for me. So it's not all that. I don't even know if it would have probably been a top 15, but barely would have scraped it, I think. French Revolution, however, if we had both been at the same time, would have been the top 15 because just like Odyssey, it's a super weird Vekoma coaster. This one is an earlier generation. I kind of lump it in maybe even with like Space Mountain in Paris, as in this like unique kind of concept coaster that was really kind of dictated by the park it was going to and not necessarily by a layout. So it meanders around this indoor park at Lottie World Adventure in Seoul, and because it was meandering around an indoor theme park, it's not very big. It had to do a bunch of different elements. And so it has like a helix in the beginning and like it's a really weird drop and a vertical loop and like a really sharp helix at the end. I'm sure people have heard of French Revolution before. But that's definitely a coaster I wanted to mention.
We also, so I rode Nemesis in 2015, obviously. That was a highlight of my 2015 trip. Nemesis Reborn was technically, we counted as a new credit. If you don't, that's fine. But we counted as a new credit because the OG was completely demolished and a new roller coaster was built on top of it. Kind of like how Space Roller Coaster in Beijing was replaced by a copy of itself. This is becoming more common in this era, like of steel coasters. You know, when the steel coaster is worn out, you just have to replace it. You have no choice. But when it's a ride like Nemesis, it's like, well, just build it again. So we would have included Nemesis, but we felt like it would be worth it to include other roller coasters that the experience was truly new for both of us. Whereas for me, I had expectations from the old Nemesis. I will say the Nemesis Reborn exceeded my expectations, and I think it actually was running better and faster for me than it did in 2015. But writing it and having it as a new credit, be that as it may, it didn't really capture the essence of this episode, so we omitted it from our top 15 list. We also rode, we said we rode Rapterra this year. That was Rapterra was the most significant of the United States new coasters this year that we rode. And I'd say significant just because of like the size and the scope of the product, but it was not good. It was not enjoyable. This mention is not honorable.
I wish it would have made the list because it was probably the coaster I was really excited for in the US. I love my wind coaster, as mentioned before, but the way that these current B&Ms are running, it just runs like absolute trash. I hate to say it, it's just a really, really terrible ride experience, and it could have been a worthy replacement of Volcano if it didn't run so terribly. And we did talk about this more in an episode called "The Current State of B&M in Virginia," so check that out. But we had to talk about it because we did ride it together for the first time this year, and it could have totally been the top 15, except for it wasn't running very well.
I guess Big Bad Wolf is a good honorable mention too. Not really substantial enough 15, to make the top 15, but a nice new for 2025 coaster that was better than Rapterra because it is just better at being what it is supposed to be than Rapterra is. The Wave at Drayton Manor. Speaking of Staffordshire parks,
shout out.
We're shouting out the Wave. We count it as a new credit. I rode it as a stand-up coaster in 2015. With the new trains, it became a sit-down coaster, just like how B&M stand-up coasters became floorless coasters here and there, like Rougarou. We count them as new credits because the ride has a new classification. It is a new type of roller coaster. And for us, we feel like that is reason enough to give it its own distinction. And the Wave, even though it has a floored looping coaster train, it's just a sit-down looping coaster train. It's still very, very good. In fact, of all of the former stand-up coasters that are no longer stand-up coasters, this one might be the best. The train that it runs, this art engineering lap bar only train, is phenomenal. It is such a good ride. If you've ridden Cannibal at Lagoon, it's a very similar train, and the ride just runs awesome. It is a better ride than it was as a stand-up coaster, in my opinion, even though it was sad to see the Intamin stand-up trains be retired. This was a huge improvement. But like Nemesis Reborn, including it on the list, we felt like it didn't quite capture the essence of what we wanted to do with this episode, so we omitted it. Speaking of Drayton Manor, we also had to omit Gold Rush because it wasn't open. Even though that was a new for 2025 coaster that might have made this list, but we didn't write it because it was saddled.
And then the coaster that Alex rode years ago, and then when we went to Happy Valley, it's actually was our third time trying. So Alex rode Fireball in 2017, and then we went in 2018, and it was closed. The whole park was closed because it snowed out, so we left. So we just went by
we
Metro
knew it would be closed, but we went to see it.
So, but we had it planned, for that trip. In 2019, we went back, and Fireball wasn't open, but everything else was, except for the
Fireball and the Mega Light were down on that visit.
So then I came back again and again, like this summer or this fall, and I went to Happy Valley, Shanghai for like the third time. And this time I got them both. The Megalight's a Megalight, but Fireball, guys, Fireball is an incredible little ride. This is one of my favorite layouts I've ever done on a wooden coaster. It runs PTCs and they're heavily padded, and I thought it ran really well. Like I was actually pretty comfortable, even though it tracked decently. Like I wasn't like tracking amazing, but it tracked fine. And oh my god, it's one of my favorite wooden coasters I've ever been on. It's super easy to get to, by the way, guys. If you're in Shanghai to go to Disney, you have to go to this park because they really cleaned up their act. I feel like the park is in so much better shape now, which is the case for most Happy Valley parks. They're really cleaning up their acts. But I had such a fun little afternoon, and riding Fireball was a highlight of the fall because I did a lot of Chinese parks in the fall, actually. I feel like I did like 5 in 1 month.
You went to Sun Park in Beijing.
Different trips there. I went back to back to back to back.
Coaster.
Yeah. But Fireball, really, guys, was a highlight. Great coaster. I would recommend you look up a POV of it. In fact, I may do it afterwards because I can't really explain it to you because it's just such a weird... From the outside, it looks like a standard wooden coaster layout. It doesn't look special at all. But then what happens on the inside of the layout, like, what happens within the wooden structure, craziness. Like, it's such a creative layout. I'm surprised you haven't seen more of that, like, or of anything in the US or something. It's a really fun, modern-day wooden coaster, like it's inspired by the old Woodies, but built in 2009, so it's a very fresh take on things. Definitely was a great coaster that deserves a little shout out. But again, Alex already ridden it, so it didn't fit in the top 15. Damn it. So that kind of rounds up this episode, and again, it's going to be kind of like a calendar to Christmas for those that celebrate, whichever way. So once this episode launches, every day we're going to post a photo of it, maybe a little bit more, talk about the coasters, and maybe if some of these coasters you never seen before, you want to see some photos of them, just follow us on social media, Instagram or Facebook, The Coaster Kings, and we'll have it out there. Now, this episode is part of season 6, and season 6 has had a lot of really cool episodes, and some of the episodes I want to highlight real quick. are kind of like historic episodes that are doing really, really well. Like these are pretty much some of the stuff we put the most effort into, but are also some of the most popular episodes that we've ever released. And that includes the episode on Jaga Lake. We've remastered it. We've relaunched it. So make sure to check that out. Jaga Lake is, of course, one of the most fascinating stories in the theme park history, and that's really, really cool. And then we also did a 2-part episode on Astroworld, where we nerd out and we discuss the whole history and the reasons that it closed and where the rights went, all that. And that's also one of our most popular episodes we've ever released. So if you haven't listened to those, definitely check those out. And we've got a couple more episodes coming up. I think we may do one about Disney Adventure World, the new Disney theme park in Paris. Is it really truly new? No, but because it's practically a complete relaunch of an existing park that is doubling in size, and every area has been completely reimagined from its opening year. If you compare opening year to now, it's a complete new theme park. So then we'll discuss that a little bit more, what's to come, some really exciting, nerdy stuff. And we're going to Disneyland Paris ourselves. By the time this launches, we should be drinking champagne on Main Street. Can't wait. So we'll probably combine it into one episode. Alex, anything to add to this?
No, I think you covered it. We've got our flight leaves in 7 hours.
Yeah, to go to Paris. I can't wait. We're overdue for a little Christmas Disneyland Paris. And we'll catch you guys on an episode next week. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.